Next, we're moving on. After glycolysis, the end result of glycolysis was to produce two molecules of pyruvate. Now keep track here. One glucose molecule has actually 6 carbons. And so if I split that up into 2 equal molecules, that's 2 pyruvate molecules, each one with 3 carbons. This is all going to make sense when we wrap it up all together in the end, but let's make it through these few stages here. We mentioned that glycolysis only happens in the cytoplasm. So glycolysis is pretty much equivalent to anaerobic respiration. So if you're doing anaerobic respiration, you just made 2 ATP molecules and you're done. That's it. But like all other aerobic organisms, if we need lots more energy than that. And so that's where mitochondria comes in. And this thing looks like a glass slipper for somebody with really funky looking feet. So this is just mitochondria, organelle, you are used to hearing about as the powerhouse of the actual cell. So energy is being made in here. So this is where we actually enter the mitochondria and it becomes relevant. So this is all going to make sense. So remember, think big picture. Now we're just going to follow the path of one pyruvate molecule. One pyruvate molecule is going to be converted, well, it needs to feed into the next thing called the Krebs cycle. Unfortunately, pyruvate can't just feed directly into it. It needs to be converted into something else, and it happens to be called acetyl coenzyme A. Acetyl coenzyme A. Now, this is kind of interesting because acetyl coenzyme A can feed into the Krebs cycle, which is the next stage in this entire thing, but sugars and carbohydrates are not the only thing that we can break down and respire. We can actually break down proteins, and when we're really, really hungry and starving, we can actually break down our own proteins and muscle to actually convert that into energy. And it turns out that those proteins also get converted into this thing called acetyl coenzyme A. And we can also break down fats to make energy. And it turns out fats can be processed and converted into acetyl coenzyme A. So this seems to be the main molecule that the Krebs cycle recognizes. So whether we get it from carbohydrates or from fats or from proteins, as long as we convert it into this guy, we can feed it into the next stage. So this is called a link reaction, and we're just learning it for glucose because that's our main respiratory substrate that we're actually using. So here we go. Turns out pyruvate, you should remember, I just mentioned, is still 3 carbons because one glucose produces 2 of these guys. And in the end, acetyl coenzyme A actually only has 2 carbons. So I have to lose a carbon in the process. But this makes sense because according to my original understanding from 6th grade of respiration is that I breathe in oxygen and I breathe out carbon dioxide. So if I take away 1 carbon from pyruvate to make a 2 carbon molecule over here, guess what? That's a carbon dioxide molecule that I'm breathing out. It's a waste product right there. And just to balance things out, this coenzyme A gets converted, joins together with the pyruvate, and then you end up with the carbon dioxide coming off, and then a really fancy looking acetyl coenzyme A molecule. And actually, I should go back and take a copy of this little ticket here. Oops. Ticket, copy. Because look, I get another ticket over here. So this whole process actually gives me 1 additional NADH molecule, which is a ticket, which I will use later to convert into more ATP. So put that in your pocket as well too, and try to keep track of how many there are here. So it turns out, okay, by the way, CoA stands for, this is the full name for acetyl coenzyme A. Acetyl coenzyme A, it has 2 carbons there. And we just name these parts here. So again, this is an oxidation reaction. Remember, the NAD plus got reduced to NADH, but in the process, remember, every time there's a reduction reaction, there's an oxidation reaction. So that means this guy, pyruvate, got oxidized. So that's an oxidation reaction of pyruvate. Every time you say NADH being formed, that's an oxidation reaction. And then down here, let's just give it a fancy name for removing carbon. It's just called decarboxylation. So this is what we call a link reaction. And this link reaction is happening in the matrix of the mitochondria. You're going to learn about the structure of this thing later. The inside jelly bit is where Keanu Reeves hangs out. That is known as the matrix. The outer membrane is called the outer mitochondrial membrane. The inner membrane, which is squiggly here, is called the inner mitochondrial membrane. And the space inside is called the matrix. So this all just happened inside the matrix. And if you have to give a full fancy name for the entire thing, then we would call this oxidative decarboxylation. I can't even say it. which means there's an oxidation reaction and decarboxylation happening. And don't forget, that's our little ticket right there, NADH, that we're going to use later. That is the link reaction.